Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, where we discuss the latest DevOps news, AWS announcements, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's October 1st, 2025. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. Cloud Posse sells AWS reference architectures that get you production ready in just 2 weeks. So if you're curious to learn more, go to cloudposse.com. Now, I do have one ask. If you find anything in our episode today interesting, go ahead and share it with your team. Just go over to youtube.com/cloudposse, where we'll be posting a recording of this session live. You can join us live by going to cloudposse.com/officehours, where you can register and get an invite link. The format of our call is very informal. You can engage as much as you'd like, ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, this is a great place to ask. For those from the recording, we host these calls live, so don't miss out. All right, here is what caught my attention this week. First thing was HashiConf was last week, and I kind of can admit I've been a little bit less interested in going. I used to be in the ambassador program, but at some point they decided that Cloud Posse was, competitive or something with Terraform Cloud. I don't know. Or because of our relationship with other tacos like Spacelift, they decided to revoke that. So HashiConf has been kind of uninteresting to me. But two interesting announcements came out of HashiConf, which was just last week. Terraform actions and another feature I'll talk about in a minute. What are Terraform actions? Well, glad you asked. So if you ever try to work with ECS deployments or Lambda deployments or certain kinds of operations in AWS or in your cloud provider that don't fit the classic CRUD model, it can be really painful. And you end up doing a lot of hacks to get around it. Terraform is great at being like a sledgehammer when it just comes down to, bringing things up, bringing things down, but doesn't really handle anything in between. So actions allow you to define certain events, named events or named commands, if you will. I would say actions are kind of similar to custom commands in Atmos, except for actions relate to a specific root module where you define them. So they give some examples here where you could use an action maybe to run an Ansible playbook. And the state of the playbook is something that's managed by how you run Ansible. It's not stateful in the same way that Terraform resources are that you deploy there, even though there is like an Ansible resource under the hood. So actions are a great way to codify that. I've always liked this pattern because you want your documentation to be executable. Just documentation that lives in a markdown file grows stale because nobody's executing it except for the new guy you hire who tells you that command didn't work. So in the best possible situation, you have all your commands and documented in this case through actions here. I'd be curious if the schema allows you to add things like a description to that action. I think that would be a convenient addition to this. Now, this is something in the BSL version of Terraform. I don't believe this is in OpenTofu. My guess is as soon as these features come out, there's usually an RFC in OpenTofu to add some parity for it, but I haven't seen it yet. I think all in all, it's a welcome addition. Thoughts on this, anyone? Also cool is that it can reference your state. So that's really convenient.
I used to do this with like gluing, the outputs of Terraform into the inputs of Ansible playbook. But this should remove that,
Yeah,
this make that easier. Seems interesting to me to try.
Yeah. Also, yeah, that is interesting. I wonder, I assume that, and then they don't talk about it here, I think, but since it's just HCL, this could presumably be bundled with a module, and a module could ship with actions that you take. This is also interesting, like if you want an action to maybe just refresh or taint some resource and expose that functionality easily. I didn't see, is there a It'd be interesting if, I don't know what kind of discovery they provide, if there's any commands to list the actions available. And if there's a dry run mode, for example. All right, the other related announcement, and my screen went blank. Let me see if this works. Nope, that did not work. And new is Terraform Search. Terraform Search is the way I understand it, is another convenience function that allows you to query your underlying resources and have named queries that you define. And then you can call on at any point in the future. So you could create a query for like listing your instances, and then you can call that from the command line. And under the hood, it uses your existing cloud credentials, provider configuration to get that information. I think that's pretty cool way of doing discovery. I could also see that this is nice for working with Cloud Code, making it easier for it to interact with the infrastructure you've deployed and ask questions about it. Any questions about search or any other interesting things you got from it? These queries you define in a special file called .tf query. Oh, that ends with .tf query HCL.
I remember last office hours we looked at the state graph and how that would also help with querying your resources, albeit in a more Postgres-y way. But this looks a bit like it's trying to close that gap almost, where it sees what others are doing with Terraform and making an official version of it in their way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, tangentially related, I would say. I guess this is almost more like a steam pipe approach to brute force understanding your resources deployed in real time, while the other one is actually a graph database which has all that information stored as those things are updated. Now, I did get a little bit more clarity on the state graph thing. It is very early in the planning stages of that. I don't believe it's a flushed out thing that you can bet on coming out anytime soon, but it is very excited to see something like state graph come out if it does. All right, next was a interesting utility. So what I like about this, or let me talk about the problem. So one of the nice things about Terraform is, it can come up with the graph by querying the current state of the cloud, comparing that with the desired state in your repo, and intersecting and comparing that with what you previously deployed, and then doing the three-way merge of that to come up with a graph of what you should do. Now, as soon as you break apart your Terraform into multiple Terraform root modules, what we call components, you lose some of that. And now you don't really know what's affected between perhaps two commits in a easy way to reproduce that. Maybe based on what changes you want to run different Terraform commands. Tools like Atmos and Terramate include this out of the box, where you can query where you can run a command like in Atmos. It's Atmos describe affected, or Atmos Terraform plan -- affected, Atmos Terraform apply -- affected, which will compare two commits and come up with a graph of what should be applied in what order based on dependencies. This is implementing this in a generic way, where, like, let's say you're not using a framework like Atmos and you're just using OpenTofu directly. This could be something you add into the mix, and it lets you compare two branches and then find out which paths were affected that you should plan or apply. So I think this is great. My personal opinion on this though, and it all depends on where you're coming at, right? Like if you have a large Terraform estate with all your infrastructure deployed that way, and it all grew organically in your organization, and yeah, fine. get this, pick it up, find a place for it, add it to the shell scripts, and the GitHub actions and whatever else is happening. What I don't like about it, and this is contradictory a little bit to the Unix philosophy, right? The Unix philosophy is take a lot of tools, have a lot of small purpose-built tools that do one thing well, and string them together with pipelines, conditionals, and bash scripts. And I cut my teeth on this, and I think too much. They're worn down because since I've been working with Linux since I was, pre high school and systems, it's all been about that, and I took it wholeheartedly. And ironically, Atmos, the tool that we've built, is not that, because what I've conceded at this point is at some point, stitching all these tools together in totally different ways by company A doesn't do it the way company B doesn't do it the way company C, and even teams within the company do it different ways, and then it's all done with shell scripts, and those shell scripts, yeah, you could use bats, but let's face it, most organizations aren't doing proper test-driven development for their shell scripts and all of that, and it just becomes a hodgepodge. So this is why we've taken a different approach at Cloud Posse. Rather than taking all of these tools now and trying to stitch them together and being dependent on 15 different tools working and being maintained, we created Atmos, which is a framework that embodies all of these concepts and ties it together in an opinionated but not rigid way that lets you get the same benefits in a framework-like approach. So that's why, check if that sounds interesting. You should check out Atmos Tools, which has these kinds of capabilities. Like if you, we have it coming out. We have some updated docs coming out soon. I'll share that go into how you would use that. I'll do that on the next call. All right. Next one was a plugin for Kubectl. If you're familiar with Kubectl, it is like porcelain-like plugin interface where you can register plugins that are written in any language. They can be shell scripts, they can be binaries, and then they work within the Kubectl command. So Kubectl Find is a plugin for Kubectl, and it adds really nice find-like functionality that I would like to see using Kubernetes. So, just show me all the pods that are crash looping right now, right? Or show me all the pods with a certain label, or help me find pods that have based on a certain age. And there's a bunch of different expressions you can use to filter that down. So looked interesting. Any questions on this before we move on to the next item? All right, and the last one that caught my attention this week was Coderabbit has come out with a CLI. I could have sworn I looked recently for this and didn't see it, so I assume it happened very, very recently, but I don't know that for a fact. I could have just been blind. But the Coderabbit CLI brings Coderabbit functionality to your desktop. Also, I believe people have used this to then create an MCP around the CLI, so you can use Coderabbit with your editor of choice, whether it's Claude Code, Cursor, etc. I have not had a chance yet to kick the tires on the Coderabbit CLI. But this is pretty cool that they have just their real-time counts here. What was I going to say on this? I'm curious, anybody using, has anybody tried this out? Anybody using Coderabbit with things like Cloud Code? What are your tricks?
I had a question. In your repos, are you using Coderabbit for your PR reviews, right?
We are for at least our tools and internal tooling. So we have like some internal repositories.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, how are you finding the quality of the reviews?
Oh, I think they're amazing, and I think they've gotten a lot better. And what I really like about it is it has accelerated the PR review process for us tremendously. with a smaller team. I think that we wouldn't be able to merge as many as we can this way. But yeah, let me give you my 2 cents on it. So it can take some getting used to, the Coderabbit reviews. They are pretty verbose, but what's really interesting as you get the hang of it is they're very thorough in explaining how they came to those conclusions, and they show the thought process and the tools that they ran to come up with those recommendations. It catches so many things from not following naming conventions to not following internal documented conventions to spotting potential panics and untested or tests that aren't actually testing what you said they should be testing, or edge cases that you didn't consider, or security considerations that you've made. You can ask it to do a targeted review of things. And what I like about it is checks and balances. So you're using your own workflows for doing the development, whether it's Cloud Code, Cursor, etc. And you have your rules that you've specified for that, and it's following those. But there's a bias that I see happen all the time with those, which is they also don't like to think too hard, too long. And they also look for the shortest path to success, which I don't blame, but also can be contradictory to some of the project goals you might have, like security, complexity, and reuse. Coderabbit finds, all the time for us suggestions that, hey, you already have this function, or what was I going to say? Anyway, but it's worked really well for us for that. Where we haven't applied it yet is our Terraform module ecosystem. And let me explain. And I don't know if this is for better or worse. So the things that we've learned, the painful lesson over the past year with Atmos, were some pretty obvious best practices in hindsight that we weren't following. One was having strict lint rules and linting. One was not enforcing code coverage across some of the tooling that we have. And that made some of the development much slower for us as we brought in tools like Cloud Code and the agentic editors, because there was less ways to validate it. And as a result, there's also just an overwhelming amount of comments on PRs, more than any of your teammates have ever left, and more thorough than any teammate has ever done. And expanding on it, and you can have conversations with Coderabbit about those things, and it can get a little tedious because you're not used to being told how suboptimal your implementation was. So what I found is just a tremendous amount of feedback in the beginning. As I feel like our test coverage is getting better, our conventions have improved as a result of having documented conventions, having linting enforced, having code coverage there. The amount of reviews is going down, but it's still a challenge. So why have we not done it on our open source ecosystem? One thing I've learned, running Cloud Posse now for 10 years, is what you can expect from contributors. And it can be pretty hard to subject them to that rigor of review for everything. And it also requires the legwork of all the other things that I said, from linting to rules, etc. And those are not always universal across the repositories. So I think it would work better for us if we had started with it, or start new repositories or projects with it and grow into it. But trying to bring it in retroactively will cause some trouble. And let me explain. So one of the things you'll frequently see is it'll recommend changes that you should make, but as the contributor's like, dude, that was already there. That's not my problem. That was he who did it. Why do I have to fix it? My policy for like the projects and tools we maintain is that's how we pay back debt, a little bit at a time. but we can't really expect the community to pay back that debt in their pull requests when they're contributing and just trying to get things done. So that's one aspect. The other aspect on this that I've seen is people don't, not everyone takes kindly to the Coderabbit reviews. And I don't want to fight that battle right now, even though I believe they're right. I see their point, but I don't think so. Until we have a coherent strategy on it, I think we're gonna not subject code reviewers to it. But thoughts on
Partly due to
that
kind
was a
of
long
overwhelming.
monologue there.
No, so it's like partly due to the overwhelming nature of suddenly newcomers who are just trying to contribute something small get hit with potentially multiple comments, and partly with some folks just don't take kindly to
Yeah.
criticisms, no matter how constructive.
Yeah, it is that. It is that. I've seen it so many times where the developer gets all, snooty with it and criticizes Coderabbit on his reviews or things. And then I look at the comment and actually it's right. And here's the other problem with it. Coderabbit then remembers that thing. So I haven't looked at the settings. If you can tell it to do not learn from community, like people who are not in the organization, what's good or bad, right? Because that's just going to pollute the knowledge there.
Gotcha. I wasn't even aware of that part.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on Coderabbit? Or using similar tooling?
I use a similar tool for. Actually, like it. I did a PR recently. Had a bunch of comments with, but at the time I didn't have, which is one of the issues, right? Because I was like, okay, there's a lot of comments here. I really don't have time right now because I need to do other stuff work. So I started to like, okay, correct one at a time, I guess. My PR is merged for the dev. Is the one that's most vendor diff.
Oh, that one. Yeah. I remember you did open something recently, so I was trying to look it up. But just so everyone else has kind of the context here, I'll pull up like another one. Here's a pull request I've been working on, and I've gotten a solid 53 comments on this. As you go through it, and what's nice is it will resolve them as you complete them. This one I marked resolved, I guess, but it will also detect it as you're.
Yeah, and I like that. I actually like it's obviously in this project in particular, it's really hard because there's gonna be flags that I didn't maybe did, but because I'm modifying that file, it's gonna be bringing it up, which is cool. And I think the person that is modifying the file also has responsibility to address all of that. I don't think that's an issue. In my work, I use Copilot. And I have been really liking it. I have had issues where the devs at the beginning at least had a lot of issues with it. But as you, I have also noticed it's often right than that. So it's like, but it's.
And what you can do in those situations also that I like, similar to Copilot, but if one of these was accurate, but hey, great idea. Can you create an issue for this at Coderabbit AI, and then hit submit, and then it'll create the GitHub issue, and we can close this. So we at least track it, and we can fix that in a.
That's cool. I didn't know that as well. Okay, that's cool. That is way better.
Yeah, so that reduces some of the burden. And what I love more and more as I've been using this and like Conductor in my case, I've talked about it here before, but with like Conductor, it's linked up into our linear. Then I have the issue. Then I can tell Conductor, hey, pick up that issue from linear and open up a PR to address that. So then that helps you create smaller PRs by not feeling overwhelmed to solve every single thing in that PR, even though I'm very guilty of doing that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay. So that is all I have today. Let's see the Zoom chat here. I wasn't paying attention. Let's see. So Oh yeah. So Rishav, were you doing something similar to this in your GitHub action that we were talking about earlier, the TF affected or whatever it was called?
Oh no, unfortunately not. No, the comment I had was with the Terraform actions, the way you know how it triggers some actions now, and I was wondering, is that some kind of middle ground between Ansible? But I think that's not quite right because it's triggering Ansible to do its thing. It's not really,
Exactly.
yeah, they're
It's the
kind of
hook, it's the glue between Terraform and that. So you can have a single way that drives it. And since Terraform in this case is the source of truth for a lot of that information, resource IDs, IPs, etc., it makes sense that it's the driver then that calls Ansible passing that information.
I think this is going to be one of those where it will make a lot more sense when you see some real examples, especially with the Terraform ECS modules, where you could see a
Yeah,
module being initialized and then have a certain image or certain commands run on it. That would be huge.
yeah.
Uh,
Nice.
I haven't looked myself, but I don't think it's strictly Ansible.
Oh, no. It's just any command, yeah.
Right. So it's just more just adding an imperative layer to an otherwise declarative interface, right?
Yeah. And yeah, so going back to this, yeah, it's really being able to execute oh, so do they have built-in actions then? I thought, wait, thanks for bringing this. There's a piece that I'm missing here. I was expecting to see that you could define like a command to run with an action. But are actions exposed by the provider?
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
just
it's
what it said.
Hmm.
So only supported Lambda invoke and CloudFront invalidation. That's the two I look into the source code even, but I don't know where the Ansible example coming from. No resources online yet,
Hmm.
like official one, I mean.
yeah, I see the Lambda info. So I could see that there might be a provider tie-in here.
Yeah, I think
I
that's what it is.
Yeah, I could also there's
Yeah.
also comments in this blog post that I skimmed that talk about being able to customize by triggering based off hooks like post to pre-apply, stuff like that.
Hmm. So there is a hooks tie-in?
There's a hooks dimension as well
Hmm.
in the basic lifecycle hooks. But the link I posted might be a good read also.
I'm gonna open that up here. Hmm. All right. Yeah, I don't see anything immediately to add to it. Life cycle here. Yeah. Okay, so it ties in with life cycle events. That's cool. All right. Let's see what else was in the chat. Michael, you shared some link here. Let's see.
Yes, I did share a link to a repo. It was brought to my attention a day or so ago. It's a library of tutorials and example scripts for working with the AWS CLI.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's sponsored by AWS or produced by AWS. I thought it was kind of interesting that the timing on it for a couple different points. The first one is I felt like for like the past, I don't know how many years AWS has been harping CDK. So it's like CDK this, CDK that, or whatever. And now here is an example. It's like, hey, it's pure CLI. It's like CLI
know.
everything.
We talked about it on Office Hours a few weeks ago, this announcement as well. I think I called it AWS announces a new initiative, infrastructure as Bash. And
Okay. No, I like it. Yeah, I must have missed that one. But
yeah.
so my other point on this one though, I feel like somebody just got really happy with Amazon Q, their AI system, and like gave it like a really nice prompt, a couple MCPs that tied into AWS infrastructure, and was like, hey, based on all the information that you have available, look at all the AWS services and just like generate tutorials and scripts and everything, and just kind of dump this out as a result.
I guess the only other, I mean, this is unsustainable, unmaintainable, and not to mention not a single automated test for any of this. And this is exactly the problem today that I have with Bash, and the problem I have with stringing together the 25 Linux tools to accomplish an outcome, which I get, but not as a product. So that's and the fact, given the timestamps of all of this, that looks like probably what happened. The only other idea I have is this giving kind of context to AIs so they learn how to use the commands so that they can, perform those commands with AWS CLI more intelligently, maybe.
Yeah, it could be like a good library for training information. Like if you come up to Amazon Q and say, oh, help me get started with Amazon Neptune. I've never used Amazon Neptune before. I'm just mentioning that because I can see it on the screen. And it says, oh, this is how you do it, and it can regurgitate this tutorial, maybe run some of the commands. The only benefit I see for this particular thing as a resource is maybe if someone's adept enough to read the tutorials and like exercise the steps themselves. Because some of the tutorials, I just looked at a few of them, but the few that I looked at, they weren't so bad. I would not run these scripts wholesale, but some of, like, if you drop into the one that you're on now, if you just click Amazon Athena gs.md, the one right above the script, it kind of walks you through what you need to do, right? So if you read this from top to bottom and kind of walk through it as a lesson, that you can, kind of mirror, then that's not so bad. It's if you're trying to, I don't know, study for the AWS solutions architect thing or whatever, you need to get some hands-on experience real quick. This might not be so bad for that, but as somebody who's just like, oh, I just want to learn how to use Amazon Athena, so I'm going to run this script. No, I would not use it for something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, different strokes for different folks. This probably appeals to some, just like CDK appeals to some, Pulumi, some, Terraform, some, etc. So there's a market for everything. And for everything else, there's Bash. All right. Any other things here? Let's see the chat. All right, I think that no, there's one thing here Jim shared. What is this? Unitree robot exploit. What is Unitree?
So Unitree is this interesting humanoid robot that you might have seen on X, where these Chinese researchers have been able to design this robot and then do kung fu with it, and generally abuse it.
I did see that. Yeah.
And it falls down, gets right back up. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But this exploit pertains to a little bit of potpourri. This exploit takes advantage of its it uses Bluetooth to do its initial Wi-Fi configuration. It has a configuration endpoint for that. So imagine this kung fu robot being exploited with root level credentials, remote code. Just an interesting observation. Obviously, if you have these robots, you probably want to manage its configuration on it, but it seems that we're moving from a world of exploits against computer devices to now humanoid robots that can that can do kung fu. So
Yeah, why I'm smiling right now is because I don't think I have considered that before and the implications of that. I could totally see, robots being on the front line at some point in the future, like we've seen in all the science fiction movies, but that they can get compromised and then literally maybe reprogrammed to turn against you behind your, defenses, to attack you from the inside. I guess that could happen.
yeah, so welcome to the future.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for sharing. All right, Michael, your turn. What's up?
Yeah, I appreciate the call out. I really do indeed. I missed the past few gatherings, so I'm glad to be here today for this one. I do have something to share, so you didn't catch me off guard this time. I'm gonna drop a link into the chat here, and I'm happy to share that from cover to code, the podcast is back for season 3.
Oh, this is your podcast.
Yeah, Angela Andrews, who you may know from the Red Hat podcast compiler, and I started this podcast earlier this year. I think it was literally January 25 we kicked this off. And so we did 2 seasons for, and to give a little background for people who aren't familiar, we're basically it's a book club. We're reading tech books and then offering our opinions and thoughts and lessons learned kind of as we go. First season we did uh, good grief, the DevOps Handbook by Gene Kim. Second season, we did Learning AWS Lambda. I forget the author's name, but that was a pretty good one. And this season, we're doing Hands-on Python for DevOps. And we just started last Wednesday. So second episode of season 3 is coming up today. We're actually recording this afternoon. You can catch us live on YouTube or LinkedIn. I don't have those links handy right away, but I'll try to put them in the Slack maybe before we go live.
Drop them in Slack.
Yeah, or you can catch us on now Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and a couple other places. If you search in your podcast reader, you'll probably find it. We're not on Apple Podcasts yet, but that's like kind of like the golden fleece of being, a podcaster. You want to have your podcast listed on Apple Podcasts. So that's coming soon, but we're pretty easy to get right out of the gate.
Very cool. Very cool. I forget, we use some service that just syndicates it everywhere.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what it is. Yeah, you've recorded a lot. Boy, this has got to be a tremendous learning experience for you to be reading all these books and then discussing them.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, I appreciate it as I guess kind of a senior person, because I give opinions from a lot of different perspectives. Like if I was a newcomer reading some of these books, I wouldn't have the perspective of like 20 years of experience. So I kind of am able to call out to people who might be listening to say, hey, if you're reading this book and you haven't encountered this particular thing, here's some things you need to keep in mind. In particular, like the Hands-on Python for DevOps, it's got a lot of stuff going on in there, and the author's he's kind of glazing past some stuff very quickly. I can sort of grok the concept, but if somebody was just reading this and they had no experience with one example I can think off the top of my head is Kubernetes, where he's like, he did a binary authorizer for Kubernetes. Very, very simple example, but like if you don't even know what Kubernetes is, let alone how to set up a cluster, let alone how to configure a cluster, then you're going to have no idea to really kind of understand what he's demonstrating. But to your point, yeah, it's great discussing it with Angela. She's been in the tech industry for quite some time as well. Solutions architect. She's got background with Red Hat and all of their services and systems. So it's good to have somebody to sort of bounce, thoughts off of and get their feedback as well as we're going through these books.
What has been the best book so far? What was the most interesting for you so far that you've read?
Most interesting for me probably was the last one that we read, running AWS Lambda, because it was essentially, and this is like if you go back to some of the season 2 books, yeah, it was the focus of the book was supposed to be Lambda, but it was a lot of Java. It was almost like how to run Java on Lambda should have been the title of the book. But I'm a Python guy, so I was coming into it from the perspective like, oh, I'm going to learn how to use Lambda for Python. but all of his examples were Java, which is fine. That's his. If I had written this book, all of my examples would have been Python. So, that's fair. But I learned a lot about the Lambda platform, specifically using SAM CLI, because one of the main ways that I work with Lambda functions before I read that book was I would take Terraform, I would deploy a empty Lambda function, just like there's nothing there, hello world, whatever. And then I would use some sort of separate system to deploy into that function space. But after reading that book, I kind of realized that I could just use SAM CLI to deploy directly, like the function, the API gateway, if I wanted to use that. And I know you can use SAM CLI for other resources, databases and whatnot, but I prefer to use Terraform, for that type of stuff. But it really changed the way that I thought about deploying Lambda functions out of the box.
It's this is the conclusion we're coming to, or come to basically as well. I think for those specialized deployment patterns for things like Lambdas, ECS, and so forth, I think a purpose-built CLI for that is probably better. And I think SAM being designed for that is a strong consideration.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Cool. Any questions for Michael on this? Or in general, his podcast?
Yeah, thanks for the time. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, Michael. You've been on this, I don't know how many, I think you've attended hundreds at this point.
Yeah, it's been dozens for sure.
Yeah. All right. What else can we cover? Any questions people have today we can get answered on the show? Mohammed, you always have a question?
Not today. I've been thinking, not today.
No worries. Let's see, nothing else in the chat. Last call for questions today, or links. All right, well, I think we're out of material for today, folks. I'm glad we got those sessions or topics covered. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. Hopefully a new batch of good announcements. If you haven't yet registered for our show, you can do that by going to cloudposse.com/officehours, where you'll get a invitation to our live weekly session. Our YouTube channel will have today's recording, as well as all of our back catalog of episodes. If you haven't yet engaged with our community, go to cloudposse.com/Slack, where you can get an invitation to join our Slack team, and our newsletter at cloudposse.com/newsletter. So with that, talk to you later. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Take care, Rishabh.